morning, everyone. This is Michelle Hughes from Ageless and Timeless. Today, I am very excited to introduce you to a guest who has a very, very recognized name, and maybe some of you have heard of him. His name is Ross Pelton. He's called sometimes by the nickname the Natural Pharmacist, and we'll be talking about that in a moment. He's not a allopathic pharmacist anymore. He's a longevity pharmacist, and he's internationally known for his work with 12 books and very prolific, of course. And then his most recent work on the drug that is a longevity drug called rapamycin. So today we're going to try to limit ourselves to the discussion of rapamycin and the associated terms that we'll be going through that will help you to understand why rapamycin is the anti-aging drug of the century and why Ross has become so interested in that understanding of that drug from the science standpoint. I think it's really cute because Ross says he's bilingual. He speaks English and science. So you'll know today that you're going to be getting a very science-based discussion. This is not anything to do with just pie in the sky. This is real science. So be prepared. Okay, welcome, Ross.
Hi, Michelle. It's really an honor to be with you on Ageless and Timeless. So thanks very much for the invitation.
Well, you are quite the role model for all of us. If you don't mind me saying a little bit about you, just to start before we start. But, you know, you probably can't tell by looking at Ross to my viewers, but he is 80 in his 80s. I don't know exactly what number, but that's okay. He is the picture of health, and it wasn't always that way, right, Ross? He was a typical SAD, a sad diet, in his earlier days, and he tells the story that he was walking by down in Southern California. He was walking by a building and he heard some music coming out of the building, and he peeked in and he saw this thing called yoga, and he was so intrigued by the positions and the benefits that the people seemed to be getting that he started to basically, look at that as an alternative for his own program. And well, out went the white bread and the milk and all of that he was carrying at the time, and in came the new Ross, which is the pharmacist of healthy living. So is that a pretty good summary, Ross?
You bet, Michelle. That's a good overview. And but along with the commitment to regular exercise and healthy food, my introduction to yoga got me introduced to people who are reading health books and health newsletters and health magazines. And with my background in science, even though I knew nothing about health, I just started to absorb this information about health-related things in the literature, and it all made sense to me, and it's been making sense to me ever since.
You know, Ross, it's interesting because I am also guilty of the same kind of entree into the wellness world. It was a little different, but I did early on read all the books of Adele Davis, all the books of Sandy Shaw and Dirk Pearson with the life extension. And I'm sure those are probably some of the books that you were reading at the same time, or maybe a little earlier than me, but similar to how we both came to where we are today.
Yeah, that's true. And this stuff was so interesting to me. When I got introduced to it, I just kept absorbing it like a sponge. And then I started to write about it, and then I started to teach about it, and I've been doing that for decades and decades now.
So tell us, let's dive deep. Okay, so all the people that watch my podcast are one common denominator, we could say, for everyone, and that is a curiosity about living a healthier and higher quality life. So being the best version of yourself. And so we're talking to the right audience to hear about your discoveries. And I want people here to understand that there are a lot of terms that you're going to hear today that my viewers and I didn't really know about until I started reading Ross's book, and I attended the American Academy of Anti-Aging, their conventions, and all throughout the literature and the innovative technology that's occurring today is this discussion of rapamycin, metformin, and of course the synonymous with those two drugs are the discussion of mTOR and autophagy. So we're going to start with defining terms, Ross, if you don't mind. So let's start with what is rapamycin. Let's get to the kind of the first stage with our understanding.
You bet. So I'll start with rapamycin. I'll make one comment to our viewers about what you just kind of covered there about new terms and so forth. Anytime anybody wants to be good at anything, whether it's becoming a lawyer or a doctor or whatever, you have to focus on the language of that particular profession, and you have to develop a whole new vocabulary. So it's the same thing with health. If people really want to be healthy, there's things you have to study and learn. And if you speak English, you're capable of doing this. There will be new terms, but after you become exposed to them 3 or 4 or 5 times, and somebody starts to explain to you what they are and why they're important, it logs in your brain, and you start to become familiar with that, and it becomes part of your own story. And so that's what I like to do. You mentioned I'm bilingual. I speak English and science, but I can talk about the science in a way that normal non-scientific people can understand it. So that background, let's start with rapamycin. Rapamycin is a drug that was discovered as the result of a group of Canadian scientists back in the 1960s who took a scientific expedition to Easter Island. And the goal of that expedition was to see if they could find sources of new antifungal or antibiotic drugs. So they took a lot of soil samples from around Easter Island, and one of the soil samples, when they got back to their labs, contained a substance that was naturally made by a species of soil bacteria. So this is a compound that's made naturally in nature. It's not some foreign compound that a drug company created. And because this compound was discovered on Easter Island, it was named rapamycin, and which is based on the indigenous people's name for Easter Island, which is Rapa Nui. So that's why they chose the name rapamycin. And so the name of this drug that originally was found to have very strong antifungal properties. So it was initially developed as an antifungal drug until they discovered that it suppresses the immune system. So all the research stopped. And then a number of years later, the FDA approved this drug for people getting kidney transplants because people with organ transplants need to be taking immune suppressant drugs all the time. And then in the early 2000s, rapamycin was approved by the FDA for several solid tumor cancers. These FDA approvals have actually been a hindrance to getting it accepted as a life extension drug. Because doctors don't usually write prescriptions for chemotherapy or an organ transplant drug for those of us that are life extension enthusiasts. But the real critical breakthrough came in a study conducted by Dr. Joan Manick. She was working at the big drug company called Novartis, and she had the enviable job of being able to research anything that she wanted to research. So she was interested in aging, and she chose the drug rapamycin, and she conducted what is a landmark clinical trial. It's the first major human clinical trial with rapamycin. She selected a group of elderly people aged 65 and older, divided them into 4 groups. There was a placebo group, and then one group got 1 milligram of a rapamycin-like drug once daily. One group took 5 milligrams once a week. The 4th group took 20 milligrams once a week. So there were 4 groups going for a number of weeks, and at the end of that time, everybody stopped, whether it was the placebo or one of the doses of the drugs. There was a washout period, and at the end of the washout period, she subjected all of the volunteers to the seasonal flu vaccine, and then did blood work and measured how their immune system responded to that challenge. The people taking the rapamycin drug 5 milligrams once a week got a 20% boost to the effectiveness of their immune system. Now, if you're an elderly person and you can get a 20% increase in your immune system, excuse me, that's a really big deal. So this was the first study that showed that taking rapamycin episodically rather than daily causes some significant health benefits.
So, Ross, question, is that the only human study that's been done on rapamycin to date?
No, there's multiple studies. Not a lot of them. Most of the studies have been done in animals.
Right.
But there's so much interest in the drug. A number of other human trials are ongoing and more are being designed. But in animal studies, every single age-related disease responds favorably. So let me talk a little bit more about the other terms in the title of my book, mTOR and autophagy, and I'll define those. And that will give me the ability to explain the mechanism of how rapamycin works as an anti-aging drug.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Gematria Products. Gematria is based in Carlsbad, California, and they manufacture ultra high quality dietary supplements using QI technology. Qi, as you probably know, is the energy that runs throughout our bodies and is the basis of Chinese medicine. Use the code AGELESS and get 20% off your order. I highly recommend Gematria's products. I personally use the Complete Aminos, the Heart Gems, and the Methuselah Life, which is an RNA and DNA sublingual spray. The website to go to is www.gematria.com/QI-technology. And there you'll find out more about this fascinating company, their products, and the technology.
I understand it's like a triage, right? We're talking mTOR, autophagy, and rapamycin. So maybe just do and define mTOR and autophagy first, so people understand where we're going with it.
Right. So rapamycin is the drug. We already discussed that. mTOR was discovered by David Sabatini back in 1996. When rapamycin gets absorbed across the cellular membrane, goes inside the cell, it binds to a protein, actually an enzyme. David Sabatini named this rapamycin site of attachment mTOR, which stands for the mechanistic target of rapamycin. So that's where mTOR got its name. It's where rapamycin binds to when it enters the cell. So now, what does this mTOR do? Turns out that mTOR is a master signaling compound in all cells. And when nutrients are available to a cell, mTOR sends out signals that says, use these nutrients to build and grow, make new proteins, make new enzymes, build new cellular components. So mTOR is the signal to recognize when nutrients are available so the body can use these nutrients to build and grow. The other side of the equation is this term called autophagy. And a Japanese scientist won the Nobel Prize for his discovery of autophagy in 2016, so it's relatively recent. Autophagy gets activated when no nutrients are available to the cell. So there are no nutrients coming in, autophagy gets activated, and it does several things. It breaks down old dysfunctional cellular components, proteins and enzymes and so forth, and either gets them out of the system, so it's a detoxification process for every cell in your body, but oftentimes it will reutilize the component. For example, if it's breaking out an enzyme or a protein, it'll reutilize the amino acids to build a healthy new protein or a healthy new enzyme. So autophagy, in addition to being key for detoxification, it's also the process for rebuilding and renewing your body on a constant basis. And that's a critically important part of health and long-term survival. And I use the example of a car that has a flat tire. You can't put the new tire on until you get the old tire off. And that's the same way with old, damaged, misfunctioning proteins and enzymes. Even though they don't work very well, they're broken down over time, they're still in place, occupying a space and not allowing a healthy new protein to come in and take over. So autophagy has to function to break down these old proteins and enzymes so that you can build healthy new ones. And for most of human evolution, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, in fact, we actually go back millions of years, we go before Homo sapiens, but as humankind was evolving over time, mTOR and autophagy were in balance. These days, they're out of balance with most people alive.
And why is that, Ross?
That's right. That's what I want to talk about and get people to understand why most people are so out of balance between their autophagy and their mTOR. In fact, this is such a critically important point that I have formulated the mTOR autophagy theory of aging, and to teach people how important this is. So back to mTOR. mTOR senses when nutrients are available. So mTOR is sending out signals, build, grow, build, grow. Compared to our ancestral humans, we eat all the time. Ancestral humans didn't get up in the morning and go to the kitchen and open the refrigerator and start making breakfast. They didn't eat 3 meals a day. For hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, we evolved to not be eating all the time, to go for substantial periods of time without eating so that autophagy can be activated. But these days, again, compared to our ancestral humans, people eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, in between meals, snacks, dessert, nighttime cocktails. Relatively speaking to our ancestors, we eat all the time. So mTOR is constantly being expressed and autophagy is not getting its adequate activity, and humankind health-wise is suffering. And so I like to draw attention to the health of humanity, which I think is declining very rapidly. And I'm in my 80s now. Back when I was a kid, 1950s and 1960s, we did not have health epidemics.
Right.
These days, we have an epidemic of cancer, an epidemic of diabetes, an epidemic of Alzheimer's disease, an epidemic of neurological diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, and so forth. We've got autism, we've got obesity. We have an epidemic of epidemics these days. The health of mankind is seriously deteriorating, and I think this imbalance between mTOR and autophagy is a fundamental mechanism that's negatively affecting the health of most people alive today. And this is what rapamycin does for you. It goes into a cell, binds to mTOR, partially inhibited, so activity of autophagy starts to take place, and you get this rebuilding and renewal and detoxification in every single cell in your body. So I tell people that rapamycin is not a miracle fix. It's not going to fix things overnight. But every single day, day after day after day, every single cell in your body will start to work better. But if you've got bone-on-bone arthritis, rapamycin's not going to fix that. If you've got an embolism in your carotid artery that's about ready to blow, and that's not going to fix these types of things. But at the cellular level, biologically and biochemically, everything will start to work better. So it's not a quick fix. It's a long-term commitment to healthy aging.
But I think I know you've said a couple of things that are really important. First of all, if anyone has any questions about where aging begins, this is something also revolutionary, that the discovery that all aging begins in the cells. And so cellular metabolism and modulation of cellular activity is really the key to your overall health. So that's number one, baseline. Number two is when you talk about autophagy and mTOR, and someone says, well, how do I know if my autophagy and mTOR ratio is off? How can you get a baseline to understand where you are before you would start any program, so that you know what you're trying to do to where you are today and where you want to get to?
Yeah, very good point, Michelle. We do not have good markers yet. The lab tests for mTOR and autophagy are being developed, but they're nowhere near ready for prime time yet. So it's not really something that you can get a baseline marker, but I do encourage people to take a baseline lab panel before they get started on rapamycin, because you'll want to track things like your iron and your hemoglobin and your triglycerides and some of these things. If you're taking too high a dose of rapamycin, you can get things out of balance. Everything can cause some problems if it's not used appropriately. But remember, the difference between taking rapamycin daily, which will cause immune suppression, and taking it just episodically once a week, that's the big difference here. So most doctors are not aware of rapamycin. The doctors that are aware of rapamycin, most of them only are familiar with it in terms of its use for organ transplant patients or chemotherapy. This is an educational process to get your doctor educated about the health benefits of episodic rapamycin. That's why I encourage people to read my book and many people give my book to their doctor, or they lend it to the doctor and educate the doctor so that they can start to understand there's significant health benefits to activating autophagy on a regular basis.
And the unfortunate part of that is that many of the doctors might take the book, but they might not really resonate to the truth of the book because they're so ingrained. It's so ingrained in them to be their allopathic approach. I don't mean to demean allopathic, because it has its place at some points, and particularly in crisis. However, you have to find a doctor who would be open to looking at something that's completely new to them. So sometimes people go to the more comfort zone. So there are other ways to get rapamycin. We can talk about that in a few minutes, because Phil Mitkins has been a guest on my podcast, and IAS, which is the company that he founded and has the ability to produce in India a very bioavailable form of rapamycin, which Rapapro. Very good. Yeah. Let's go back to the test though for a moment. So you mentioned a few things that it does measure, the baseline test. What's that test called?
Well, it's just a basic lab panel. You get a basic metabolic panel that look at your red blood cells and your white blood cells and your liver enzymes and things, your triglycerides. And
so go ahead and explain that test, and what does it measure?
Sure. So, the blood test that people want to request to check the absorption of their rapamycin is called sirolimus. Rapamycin is the name of the drug. Sirolimus is the generic name. So when you go to LabCorp, which is the big international lab that does blood draws, ask for the sirolimus blood test. And I like to get my blood drawn around 20 to 24 hours after I've taken my dose the following day to check how the absorption is. And I'm also recommending that people occasionally take a blood test just before they take their next dose. So if you take your dose today, 7 days later, just before you take your next dose, it's a good idea to get a blood test to see if your sirolimus test levels have gone down to zero, because you don't want to keep them elevated all the time, or you will get some immune system suppression. So it's just the blood test that tracks this for you.
Okay, so that's what I needed to. I wanted to clarify that the regular CBC test is what you want to do just to get your overall lab work, and then when you're on rapamycin, you would take at least that one time right afterwards, and then a week later before your next dose, so that you get to see whether you're having the right effect. Have you ever had any awareness of people who, like, taking it once a week have suppressed their immune system and have to get off?
The most common side effect of people taking rapamycin once a week is a little painful mouth ulcer. They're called aphthous ulcers. They go away in a day or two. I'd say, based on what I hear online and from some of the other experts, they say maybe 10 to 15% of people may experience this. But again, they keep taking it, it goes away. Many times people who've experienced it once don't have a reoccurrence of it. But basically, a lot of the people that are studying rapamycin say that it is far safer than over-the-counter drugs, for example, like ibuprofen or
Mm-hmm.
acetaminophen, which can cause serious side effects when they're not used appropriately. Rapamycin is very, very safe when it's taken episodically.
Okay, and what's the dosage level that seems to be the magic milligram?
The most common dose is 5 to 6 milligrams once a week, but I want to emphasize this is really a new area. We don't have enough clinical trials in humans yet, and it's hard to get these clinical trials accepted because aging itself is not an accepted disease by the FDA in the United States. And so nobody's going to research a drug if they can't get it FDA approved to treat a disease. We have to get the FDA and the World Health Organization to recognize aging as a disease. And then funding will come in to research it, and it'll accelerate the whole process. But as it is now, the rapamycin is approved by the FDA, but it's really not approved as an anti-aging drug.
You know,
I mentioned finding a doctor to write a prescription for you. Many people either can't or won't, and many doctors won't because they've got their specific standard of care guidelines in the clinic they work in and so forth. But there are some physicians who will do telemedicine visits for rapamycin. And then, as you mentioned, International Anti-Aging Systems has made Rapapro available from an overseas source. And I've tested and taken this Rapapro multiple times myself now. It's a very well formulated, very well absorbed product. The pharmaceutical company in India that is making it is using a new nanotechnology, so the particle size is very, very small. It's well absorbed. I get really good, adequate blood levels when I take my rapamycin product. So, and that's another avenue open to people to go on the International Anti-Aging website and order it online. One thing I like to educate people about, if they do this and buy the Rapapro product, they are not able to accept credit cards. So payment is either by a bank transfer or an e-check. When I did this the first time, I found out my bank wants to charge me $45 for a wire transfer. I think that's highway robbery. So just select e-check at the checkout, and you put in your bank routing number and your account number, and it goes through flawlessly with no extra charge.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I have ordered peptide bioregulators from IAS, and that's exactly how I did it. And it was seamless. You know, first you say, "Oh no credit cards," and then you get to the point where it's actually just as good to do it this way with your bank. So I would highly recommend. And Phil, anyone who hasn't seen my podcast with Phil Mickens, please do go on YouTube and just type in Ageless and Timeless Phil Mickens, Micans, and you'll learn a lot about. He doesn't plug the company, so I'm plugging them, and you're plugging them because we both have experience with their products and their service. So, okay, so go back to autophagy for a moment. It's becoming a buzzword right now because people are talking about intermittent fasting as an anti-aging mechanism. And of course, there have been many studies on the positive and the negative effect of fasting. So I use personally the 16-8 method that you, I think, use as well. And sometimes I'm not so good at it, but I try to finish my last meal by 6 or 7, and then I don't eat again until the next day, until 10 or 11. I know you go a little longer. I don't know. For me, in the morning, I like to at least have a smoothie or something that gets me, going. I don't drink coffee, so I don't have that caffeine stimulation, so I do need food. But that seems to be the easiest way to fast. I had George King on my podcast. He's a big fitness buff and out of Athens, Greece, and he trains his people to fast all during the day. And I don't know, I could not work out. I could not do the mental exercises of my business without having nutrition. So I think you have to decide what works for you. This is not a one size fits all kind of.
Right.
But giving your body a rest, even while you're sleeping, 16 hours is not that hard to do. So I would recommend that for anyone who's starting out and wants to try to stimulate autophagy, which is basically like your cellular housekeeper. It comes in, and actually Dr. Gundry just did a whole thing the other day because he's pushing his product called BioComplete 3. You probably have heard of that one with okay, well, it's pre-post, prebiotics, postbiotics, and he talks about all the different ways that you can get to autophagy. But, that everybody, has their own way of doing it. But I think this one is the easiest. So I'm just recommending that to anyone that wants to start out trying intermittent fasting without having to do it during the daytime hours. So.
Just and to emphasize what you're sharing with your viewers here, intermittent fasting is the natural way to get a better balance between mTOR and autophagy. Rapamycin does it for you when it crosses the cellular membranes and binds to mTOR, but the natural way to do this is intermittent fasting, and the 16-8 protocol that you mentioned is probably the most familiar and probably the most commonly used one. And I do that most of the time. I'm not fanatical about it. If we have a social event or something, I'm not going to tell people I'm not going to participate because I'm fasting. Life is to be enjoyed. But the other thing that I do periodically is I occasionally do a 2 or 3 day fast. Some people can't do that. But for me, it's easy. I realize that a lot of my eating is habit. And when I set my mind to not do it, I've gone both 2 and 3 days, multiple times, and I just drink herbal tea with lots of water, or black coffee, organic coffee with no cream or sugar or anything. And those are my liquids, and it's not a problem for me. And when you go for longer periods, beyond a 16-hour fast, you get much, much more autophagy activity. So you're accelerating the rebuilding your body by going for longer periods of fasting occasionally. It's not something you want to do every week, but occasionally I think there's tremendous benefits to it.
That's very good to know. And I think you can also drink bone broth if you need something warm. Like I always drink herbal tea all day long anyway, but I always, I am eating, but just like you, we're very disciplined about our choices of diet and nutrition. So, but yet you're still putting your cellular activity to work, and you're not inspiring or initiating autophagy. So, but I think if you wanted to try the longer fast, that's what you just suggested. You could add just the bone broth with maybe some vegetables that have been marinating in it. That will give you some degree of nutrition if you need that. Is that okay with you?
Again, individual protocols. Some people are going to be different. Some people will need a little nutrients to get by, because some people will go into a blood sugar crash, and it's not fun to be in hypoglycemia, and so you need to prevent that.
Right. Yeah, and some people, your blood sugar is more sensitive, so you do need that. If you get a spike, if you get a depression and you feel fatigue, that's not a good thing. It's counterproductive, right? So when is a good time to start rapamycin if you were going to use it?
Right now.
Okay, but
for all adults. So let's talk a little bit first about who should take it and who shouldn't take it.
That was going to be my next question. So good. Go ahead.
So first of all, rapamycin should never be taken by children.
Right.
Childhood is a time of rapid growth, so you don't want to interfere with mTOR during a period of rapid growth. Pregnant women should never take it, because a growing fetus is the fastest growing situation we know of, and you don't want to inhibit the growth of the fetus during pregnancy. So pregnant women should never take it. We don't know what's the best age to start taking rapamycin. it's probably a very individual thing. For example, somebody that's healthy at 50 could take it. Somebody that's unhealthy at 40 maybe get started 10 years earlier taking it. But that has not been determined. And we also don't know what's the optimum dose or what's the optimum frequency of dosing. Is it 5 milligrams once a week? Is it 5 milligrams every other week? Or maybe it's 10 milligrams every other week? We just don't know the answer to these questions. But from the Joan Manick study, we know that 5 or 6 milligrams once a week is not only very safe, it gives some significant health benefits that were measurable in terms to enhancement of the immune system. But if we go back to look at the animal models, virtually every single disease that we know of responds favorably to rapamycin. So there's good animal research that's suggestive that almost all human conditions will respond to rapamycin. And I want to emphasize that I'm so passionate about rapamycin, but it's not the only thing for people to consider for healthy longevity. I'm also passionate about the human gut microbiome and teaching people about the importance of postbiotic metabolites. It's not commercial probiotics that help to regulate your gut probiotic bacteria. It's the postbiotic metabolites, and that can only happen with a healthy plant-based diet. And most people aren't consuming adequate amounts of dietary fibers and polyphenols. And then there's glutathione to think of, and coenzyme Q10, and exercise. I reviewed a study on my website. A group of Italians studied some elderly people from age 94 to 105, and their goal was to find out what's the most important thing for healthy aging. Number one thing for healthy aging: maintain your muscle mass.
Correct.
So you've got to do some form of strength building exercise regularly, or you will gradually lose your muscle mass. And I emphasize to people that things like bicycling and swimming and jogging, those are great aerobic exercises, but you are not building muscle mass. So you got to get into the gym and do some form of strength training in order to maintain your muscle mass.
Very important. Well, as long as you've gone off onto that avenue, let's talk a little bit about the microbiome. I was going to hold that to our next meeting, our next podcast, where we would have you come back. But I think it's so important and it's so integral to anyone that's considering rapamycin or understanding of the overall impact of longevity and what contributes to that healthy living. By the way, Dan Buettner is going to be at the American Academy of Anti-Aging. He's the one of the keynote speakers, along with Dr. Oz. And Dan Buettner wrote the books on the blue zones. Yeah. And so I'm sure that I haven't read his book, but I am sure that it must discuss the microbiome of the people in these blue zones, that they eat such a healthy diet.
So it's a lot about vitamin D also.
I was just going to say, they get out in the sun, or they take an extra supplement in the winter if it's a climate that it's interesting. Most of the climates of these blue zones are very temperate, tropical. Costa Rica, even Loma Linda in San Diego is kind of temperate, compared to the northern part where I am of California. And then, of course, there's Sardinia, and there's what are the other blue zones? I think there's one in South America, maybe. But anyway, the other thing that they say that we haven't touched on, other than what we'll get to in a moment with glutathione and microbiome, is the attitude of the people. So yes, they don't have, a lot of these places are remote. They don't have physical fitness facilities, but they walk up hills. So they're building the muscles of their glutes and their legs and everything by doing some pretty exhaustive walking. But their attitude of healthy aging, of being socially connected, having some purpose in life, those are all things that we haven't really touched on, Ross. But I think they're important to add to our recipe here of healthy aging. So, but let's just put that aside for a moment. You can touch on that in a moment. Let's go through the microbiome. I really think the most important books. Oh, thank you for showing that.
For your viewers, this is a free booklet that you can have access to by going to my website, naturalpharmacist.net/Ohira book. That's OHHIRABOOK. And this little booklet talks about the mechanism of the microbiome. You've got probiotic bacteria, but we learn that the job of your probiotic bacteria is to break down dietary fibers and polyphenols into smaller molecules that have a tremendously wide range of biological activity. We call these compounds postbiotic metabolites. And it turns out that it's the postbiotic metabolites that are master regulators of our health, not just for the microbiome ecosystem, but they absorb systemically into your circulation. They influence and regulate every single organ system, including the brain and your immune system. So it's not so much the bacteria, but it's the compounds the bacteria create that are master health regulating compounds in our bodies. And most people have a total misunderstanding of commercial probiotics. Taking commercial probiotics is not going to give you a healthy microbiome. It may help. There are some studies that show benefit, but basically I've got multiple studies that show that from 90 to 95% of children and adults, and this is in the United States, but it's also true of other developed countries, do not consume adequate amounts of dietary fibers and polyphenols, and those are the foods for your probiotic bacteria. So almost nobody's giving themselves adequate food to create a healthy microbiome so they can produce the postbiotic metabolite, and consequently everybody's got health problems, or at least for the most. So it's really comes down to diversity. I try to get people to understand the importance of consuming a little bit of as many different types of colored fruits and vegetables every day as you can. You can go get access to a 8-minute YouTube that I created for people. Just do a Google search for YouTube Ross Salad Buzz, B-U-Z-Z as in zebra, and teach people how to make a microbiome supportive salad and save a lot of time doing so.
Yeah, I think that my assistant Alexis will put all of this into the show notes, or we have an actual icon on our website for Michelle Recommends, and we normally our guests like to do exactly what you're doing, which is to encourage people to order some of these follow-on, or to go to links like you're providing. So we will make sure that everybody sees. I did watch your YouTube video. That's a lot of fun. And it's not that difficult to make that salad for sure. You just have to be sure to, like, I go to the farmer's market, or even you can go to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or wherever. Just make sure you get organic. And I always try to buy the freshest that I can. And then, hey, you can make that salad and eat it without dressing. Just put the salad in the fridge in an airtight container, and you have your meal. You don't even have to start prepping everything. So it's definitely a fun adventure to watch that video of Ross's Salad Buzz. Okay, so go back to glutathione. Okay, it's probably one of the most misunderstood antioxidants. It's the master antioxidant of the body, but it's also one of the hardest to absorb. And so, people have taken glutathione pills, but they're not doing anything. You can go get an IV, but that's a real time and expense commitment. But of course, it does have, and it only lasts a couple of days. So what is the magic formula for building? Oh, of course, NAC, I forgot about mentioning, a precursor of N-acetylcysteine helps to encourage the development of glutathione. But hey, you know what, Ross, I did the DNA company's test recently with Kashif Khan, and he was a guest on our podcast. So, my glutathione gene is not very powerful. It's not working to help me to develop initiate glutathione, even with the help that I give it with the NAC, and I've taken even IVs a few times, but that's just too time consuming. So what is your magic bullet for people who want to build their glutathione reserves and not have it disappear in 2 or 3 days, that you have to keep replenishing?
Well, a very unique strain of probiotic bacteria called Lactobacillus fermentum ME3. We call it
Yeah.
ME3 for short.
Yeah.
That particular strain of bacteria synthesizes glutathione.
Yes.
It synthesizes a lot of it. We've got human clinical trials to show how effective it is. This was discovered, it was actually extracted from the intestinal tract of a healthy 1-year-old child back in 1995. And
Mm-hmm.
they originally tested it and found out that its antioxidant activity was off the charts. So it took
Mm-hmm.
a couple of years to figure out why. And it not only synthesizes glutathione, it synthesizes manganese superoxide dismutase, which is another
Mm-hmm.
really important intracellular antioxidant enzyme. So this
Mm-hmm.
has got powerful, powerful antioxidant activity. And when you take a capsule of it orally, it's acid stable. It does not get destroyed in the stomach acid. When it gets
Mm-hmm.
into your small intestine, those bacteria start to produce glutathione 24 hours a day. So you're
Mm-hmm.
boosting your glutathione levels when the bacteria are making it.
Mm-hmm.
And people taking this for 4 weeks get a 26% boost in total antioxidant activity, which means the extra glutathione is recycling and reactivating oxidized vitamin C and oxidized vitamin E. So all your antioxidant protection is coming up. And this product was discovered at the University of Tartu in Estonia. That's over in Eastern Europe, bordering on Russia.
Mm-hmm.
So it is licensed to a company in France, and it's available in the United States under the brand name RegActive. That's REG apostrophe ACTIV. That's an acronym for active regeneration.
Right.
But the RegActive products contain Lactobacillus fermentum ME3. There's several different products. There's immune and vitality, cardio wellness, detox and liver health. Then those 3 formulas have some supplemental ingredients in them to support either your liver, your immune system, or detoxification and cardio wellness. And then the 4th product is just essential ME3, and that just contains the ME3 bacteria with no other ingredients. And those are available online, but it's the most efficient and cost-effective way to boost your glutathione levels on a regular basis.
So if you take that, let's just say you took the essential one, all the other targeted ones, the liver detox, the cardio, if you're taking the essential, you're going to get the benefits of all those other areas. You just may not get these other ingredients. But is the essential one a stronger dosage of the glutathione, of the ME3?
No, it's not a stronger dosage. It just doesn't contain all the other supportive ingredients.
Right.
The dose of the 3 products that have supplemental ingredients is 2 capsules daily. The ME3 that just has the bacteria is 1 a day.
I got it. Okay. And how much does that cost to buy?
Retail price is about, I think it's like $49.95 for a box of 60. You take 2 capsules daily, so it's a 1-month supply for about $49.95.
But if you buy the essentials, is it still the same price with 1 a day? So you're getting 2
that's a little bit less. I don't have that price in mind, but it's like $39, $40. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Okay, but you still only get 1 month supply for the essential.
I don't
Take
remember.
1 a day, but it's a
30 or box of 30 or 60. I'm gonna have to check that for you.
Okay, that's okay. I'm going to have Alexis look for that online, and we'll put that in our.
I'll send a slide to you that has them all pictured, also, that you can post for people to see.
Okay, and does putting Ross Pelton in that? Is there any kind of a discount?
If they go to my website, I've got articles on all these things. Yeah.
Right. Well, I was asking, by using your name, is there any kind of a discount, or is it just?
No, I don't make any profit on this. I get no commissions on it. No.
Okay, just curious, because a lot of times we have some kind of a code.
Special deal. Yeah.
Right, but that's fine. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that this is like a breakthrough for everyone. There should be a person that isn't taking this, because I can't tell you the amount of money I've thrown away by probiotics that never make it to the colon.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a case for most people. It's just that your stomach acid breaks down. Even the enteric-coated ones are not nearly, I mean, they're much better, but they're still not doing what this ME3 does by being developed in the way that you described in its metamorphosis, right? So why? I had two questions for you. Why did they go to Easter Island in the beginning for the rapamycin, and why did they go to this Estonia for the ME3? Why those two places?
Okay, first Easter Island. For centuries, horses ran wild on Easter Island. There were more horses than people, and where horses are common, there's usually tetanus in the soil. So the scientists in Canada were curious why all the Easter Islanders who went barefoot all the time never got tetanus. So that's why they went to Easter Island, to see if they could find some answer to that question. And they found rapamycin, which is an antifungal drug, actually. I mean, it's a natural antifungal agent, but also an natural antibiotic. So that's why they chose Easter Island for that scientific expedition, and ultimately they discovered rapamycin. And the other question, why the University of Tartu in Estonia? At the University of Tartu, they have one of the most advanced microbiology labs in the world. Back in the early 60s and 70s, the microbiology department at the University of Tartu was studying the microbiome of the Russian cosmonauts to see if there's any changes in their microbiome with spaceflight. So they've got decades and decades long history of working with the microbiome. And they conducted a study in conjunction with Sweden to see why Swedish people had such a high incidence of skin problems like acne and eczema, and Estonian kids had almost zero. So they had these two groups of people from Sweden, children from Sweden and Estonia, took stool samples and looked at their microbiome, and that's how this one sample of Lactobacillus fermentum ME3 got extracted. And then a couple of years later, the scientists were studying a wide range of lactobacillus bacteria to see if any of them possessed antioxidant activity. Most of them failed, but when they tested ME3, its antioxidant activity was just off the charts. And so it took them a couple of years to figure out why this ME3 has such powerful antioxidant activity. It's because it synthesizes glutathione and also manganese superoxide dismutase. I want to say one more thing about how important glutathione is. It's also critical for the immune system. Our white blood cells, lymphocytes and natural killer cells and T cells and B cells circulate around in our system. It's our front line of our immune system, always on the alert, looking for bacterial and viral invaders and so forth. And glutathione is absolutely critical for the activity of your white blood cells. And in one study, scientists said even a slight decline in glutathione levels is a major decline in the activity of your immune system. So
that's really important
for people to recognize how important it is to keep glutathione levels up. And glutathione is really now a biomarker of aging, because the scientists that discovered chromosomes, the telomeres and telomerase, and how they regulate aging, they now understand that glutathione levels parallel telomeres and telomerase. And we know that telomeres and telomerase are what protect our chromosomes and our DNA. So that's a biomarker of aging, your telomeres and your telomerase, but glutathione parallels that. So it's the antioxidant activity of glutathione, which will actually slow down the shortening of your telomeres and accelerate the production of the telomerase enzyme, which is all related to life extension and anti-aging.
I agree. Well, the other thing, the Quicksilver Scientific makes a liposomal glutathione that you can put under your. And then my doctor in Beverly Hills has the injectable, the sub-Q. Do you think those two are doing anything better than or as good as the ME3, or should you do all of that together?
Well, I think that ME3 is the best, and I'll tell you why. Intravenous glutathione, very effective, but you have to make a doctor's appointment, drive to a doctor's office, sit there and get the IV. It's pretty expensive, and it gets IV glutathione gets oxidized very quickly. So if you get an IV glutathione today, 3 days later, it's gone. So you need to do IV glutathione a couple of times a week. And again, time consuming and expensive.
Yeah.
The better absorbed glutathione products, the liposomal formulations that do get through the stomach, they do get better absorbed because glutathione orally is not absorbed. But if they put it in a liposomal delivery form, it will get better absorbed. But nothing has ever come close to getting plasma levels of glutathione the way the ME3 has. In human clinical trials, people got a 49% increase in the ratio between reduced glutathione to oxidized, which is active to inactive. No other product in the world has ever come close to getting this level of increased glutathione. So nothing is come close to the active product.
Yeah, in terms of, if you could do all three, like, take the under the tongue.
You can, but I don't, unless somebody has severe health problems, I don't think there's much benefit in doing all three. I would just stay on the Reg Active products on a regular basis.
Okay. That's great. I hope everybody's listening. It'll save you a lot of money too, because the sub-Q injections or the IVs are like $300 or $400. So you got to factor that cost factor in. Well, Ross, we've run out of time. I'm so sorry. I knew this would happen because we have so much to cover. But as we discussed, we'll have you come back next year, and we'll do a follow-up with the other side of we touched on the microbiome, but we've got lots more, and you'll have a lot more by then too, because you keep writing these books and making discovery. So I just want to thank you so much for taking time today and being so helpful and so knowledgeable. This is something that is your passion, and you show that in every ounce of your DNA is about helping others, and I think that's so admirable. So thank you again, and I hope you have a beautiful day, and goodbye to everyone that's listening and watching today. And I hope this podcast helped you, and that you'll listen to it when we're going to be live in about a week on YouTube and on my website. And we will have the Michelle Recommends with all of Ross's links and referrals for products. So everybody have a great day. Thank you so much.